things. Well, this evening, I am so pleased to introduce my friend and colleague, Chris Pague. Chris has worked in conservation biology for over 45 years, over the world and locally. So in 1992, he started the Colorado Natural Heritage Program, which, if you don't know, is an organization that really documents all of the records of animals showing up and a lot of other things. That was a simplistic way of saying it. And then he was hired by the Nature Conservancy and has been a senior conservation ecologist at the Nature Conservancy. And he's provided science guidance locally and globally. So somebody might, have a piece of land, whether they're an organization or a private entity, and they want to know how to move forward with that. They can bring somebody like Chris in who will help strategize and make plans, figure out, what you have, what you need, what the threats are, and how to strategize conservation for that. So kind of the whole shebang, the whole plan. He also he's done a lot of different things. I'm only the tip of the iceberg here. Worked on grasslands and bison conservation. He's very involved at Zapata Ranch. And he co-led some of you may know the new state park, relatively new, Fisher's Peak, which used to be called Crazy French Ranch, just south of Trinidad. A beautiful area, so he co-led the effort of figuring out what to do there and how. So Chris and I met in the mid-90s working on a little mouse, Preble's Meadow Jumping Mouse. And Chris was really truly a guiding light. We were, this was all new. The mouse had just been listed, and he was really, really good. And so he was a guiding light for all of us. So without further ado, Chris, let you come and take the stage.
So anyway, the bottom line is there are a lot of people out there who own property, and there's some, like John Malone owns 2 million acres around the western U.S., mostly a little bit in Maine, is a little bit, about 900,000 acres in Maine. But he hires people to come in and manage his land. But a lot of people own a lot of land, and they really have an affection. Sometimes it comes later where they fall in love with it. And they want to know, how can we keep it this way, or how can we do better, or what else? And I just love getting involved with them because they're very inspirational to me. They have more means than I do, but they are amazing at having that kind of a passionate vision. And I've also tried to have that passion. And my passion has been, I have a lot of natural history, wildlife types of things that I just love, birding amongst them. But my passion is really seeing if we can, more and more land needs to be set aside. We've eaten most of it up. That's the bottom line. And so whether I work in, North America, South America, Asia, wherever it is, I'm always trying to think, how can we get more of this set aside and managed so that all life thrives there, not just one species? So anyway, that's a little bit about what we'll talk about here tonight, or what I'll talk about, and hopefully you'll get something out of it and stimulate some questions. And that's largely, I've been working here and then earlier with the Nature Conservancy and other organizations in Virginia. Go figure, the two different places. But the bottom line is, we were losing then, and we're losing now. Still, even though we're doing better. At least until recently, I could say that openly. So I think that it's something to think about is if we are, and we know we are, people like us are committed to actually trying to leave the world as a better place for all life. And I think that's really an important inspiration for me, because when you see it and it's working, it is absolutely amazing. We had some discussions over dinner about Africa and various places to go, and you can see where things are still at least somewhat working naturally. And I've been lucky enough in Colorado to tour some of the wild places that are still left, especially in southeast Colorado in the Great Plains. I fell in love with grasslands. I don't understand why. I grew up with pine forest and hardwood forest and salty marshes. So I blame it on staying on the barrier islands of Virginia. And, this was one of my early inspirational stories about actually doing protection rather than studying the life that was there. When these were in the days when things were a little more risque in the Nature Conservancy. There was a RFP that was put out for the entire eastern coast of Virginia. They wanted to develop those barrier islands. And so the Nature Conservancy created a development corporation and decided to put in a proposal. And they knew their stuff very well, so they got the bid. And of course, it was the Nature Conservancy. So, oh my, no, we can't really afford to do this. And they owned the land, and they were hated for 20 years because they didn't get that development. Now, however, they love the Nature Conservancy for a couple of reasons. One, they've allowed some very small fishing village type development. They have restored the marshes for scallops, oysters, crabs over about, let's see, 27 miles of coast now. And for me, the best thing is you see the pictures of all the islands that did have just a few houses, a Coast Guard station, and a boat ramp here or there. With the oceans rising and becoming rough and it's being barrier islands, they're all washed away. So if they'd put any houses up there, it would have been a tragedy too. So anyway, that's the kind of passionate that I came from is what can we do? And by George, let's just make it happen. So focus on the goal and then worry later about how you're going to do it. Just make sure it happens. That's my kind of motto for all of this. All right, let's see if I can get the pictures rolling. So I've said the protection of conservation lands, and I said and waters, although I won't talk much, if any, about waters, the next level. And that comes from the statement, we're still losing. We're losing more slowly, by far more slowly, but we got a lot to do if we really want to do certain things. After decades and decades of studies and everything else, we're actually fairly smart about conservation. Now, there's a lot of data gaps to be had, but we know what needs to be protected. We know it can't just be the rare and endangered species, which I worked on for so many years. It's about all biodiversity. Rare species, yes. Declining species, large species, and the systems that come with them, large patches, islands of habitat where you have no choice but that and big enough to be successful, connected lands in the face of climate shifting, and places for future life to thrive, including the human beings. That's basically it. And that's a lot. And it's more than we used to do. So I just wanted to say that we know what we need to do. And we've had a lot of studies on where the best remaining examples are. This particular example is the central shortgrass prairie. And I believe if you can't see those, Nebraska, Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, and down touching into New Mexico and Oklahoma and the panhandle of Texas a little bit. We did studies in the Nature Conservancy with a lot of partners, something like 87 partners, all the government agencies and private experts that you can think of. And we came up with a system that said, where are the best remaining places? What is it there for? And what do we need to do? And that's what you see here. It's called an ecoregional portfolio. It was about 2000, 2001. It's still one of the most scientifically based. It's a Marxan, if you ever know that term, system, and a Marxan product that actually says, if you want to protect at least 15% of what's left, there it is. It's in there, you've got to do it. Doesn't mean every piece in there, but that's where you have to do it. And now we've gone beyond that now, and we're taking that information and with newer information, but not really very different. And we're starting to see the same patterns show up. The green is what's the most parts left, and then there are landscapes in there, and then some connectivity. But that's the best of what's left. And we've done the assessments, and we're pretty sure that all of the species, almost all of the species out there can be protected in that greenish area and focusing right now on these big polygons because those are the biggest remaining ones. So we know what we need to protect, and we have a lot of good ideas about where. But what did the Nature Conservancy, I'll just speak to us, although most of our conservation organizations have gone through some phase of this. What did we do? We find something rare or beautiful, or in some cases, the board liked it, and we purchased it. Then we took care of it. So we hired staff to go in there and take care of it. Wow, that's an expensive way to do business. And I'll show you why in a minute when you see how many acres we have protected, mostly that way, but not exclusively, around the world. So that's what we did, and that's where we focused our attention. We found a purple meadow jumping mouse, we go protect that piece of property, and it's by parcel that we're protecting it, right? That one is owned over here. It's a lot more complicated when you walk up to them and say, hey, we want to protect your land. Can you sell it to us? It's got a mouse on it. So you can imagine that kind of a conversation when what you're trying to do is protect one piece at a time. And sometimes it's successful. One quick example is let's see, Arkansas River, right up here near Pueblo West. There's several plants that live almost nowhere else in the world but there, on one property, which is amazingly large ranch there, 80,000 acres. And so you can get lucky, but we said all the biodiversity. We're not that lucky. All right. All right. So one of my colleagues and I were out running around J.E. Canyon Ranch before it was J.E. Canyon. And we were standing on the side of a cliff, and then we sat down and had some lunch there, and we're looking along the cliff, and it goes all the way out about 50 miles to the to the Arkansas River. It's Purgatoire Canyon. It goes up into Alpine, the other direction, and we look to the south, and there's Mesa de Maya. And Mesa de Maya is still largely undeveloped. I mean, it's got big ranches up there, but it's largely undeveloped. And we were looking at one ranch, and it was a big ranch, 50,000 acres. It was a highly successful. A few of you have been on that ranch, I know. So we actually were successful at purchasing that ranch. And some of the lessons we learned about what I'm talking about tonight were discovered there. It takes a lot to raise $25 million in the time frame that the seller wants you to get it. And then you look, and I think that picture that I had up in the very beginning of bighorn sheep on the side, that is from J.E. Canyon. Those bighorn don't stay in the fenced-in area. You got a lot of issues to do. And you could say the same thing for the butterflies, the birds, even the small mammals. They don't stay there. They don't respect the boundaries. So that's where I learned a lot of those lessons. But the big thing is we started then having the discussions in our program about how can we start focusing on getting millions of acres protected rather than thousands. And that's what we're going to keep talking a little bit more about. It wasn't enough. And it wasn't a sad thing that we were saying that, because J.E. Canyon Ranch is magnificent. Red Rock Canyons looks like Utah, pinyon junipers that can be a couple of 100 years old in most cases, that were here before we were. So it's a magnificent place, but it wasn't big enough. That's not a rattlesnake, if you don't already know that. I don't usually get that close to them. But so the bottom line is, to be successful at that first slide, which talked about all the things that need to be conserved, we've got to get bigger, better, and faster at what we do. And so we started working on those concepts. We just need to think differently about our work and open our minds to different tools of conservation as they come about, and create some. And then I would say one of the most challenging things for me is organizational the static nature of organizations. Oh, no, this is the way we do it. You have to go talk to that lawyer, and you have to have You've got to have all the money in hand before you can get approval to do the deal. Those kinds of rules that are in place. I would actually argue now in hindsight that those rules are one of our biggest obstacles to being able to move bigger, better, and faster. So what are the things that are hemming us in? Just from a positive note, I thought I'd start there. We know where we need to work now. We can always get better at that, and I would never argue that we don't still want more inventory, more studies out there, people finding things. The observations like you're talking about here are critical for more than just protection. They're critical for our relationship with nature and that inspiration. So that's the positive part of this. We have enough information to move forward with protection today. Great studies from a lot of people. Challenges people capacity. How many people does it take to do a $25 million deal in a big organization? If you go all the way from the board, we don't want to go that far. But you've got science people, you got deal makers, you got lawyers, you got government relations. When you buy 25 million acres and you're a big nonprofit conservation organization, you've got to have government conversations and more. The biggest thing is money and getting it quick enough. That is what a big challenge. You talk about 25 million. We started a deal. We'll see. It had federal funding attached to it, and you know what that means in these days. But we're still negotiating over these discussions, but it's $94 million for one property. It's a big one, but one property. And in the past, the Nature Conservancy, oh, we can't do that. That's too much. We can't do that. That's what we're getting over. New ways of thinking. But landowner willingness, think about all those, even though there are big places out there, they're owned by somebody, and some of them don't want to sell. They don't even know you're there asking most of the time. So you've got to have a willing landowner, whether that or an easement, even an easement. They're not going to give you an easement without knowing what it is. And you got to get into the deal. This is another part that we didn't really understand in the beginning. Big property comes up for sale. The brokers have already contacted the billionaires, so they're way ahead of us on this thing, and they could just write the check if they wanted to, but we don't find out about it until it goes public. And then once it goes public, what do? Do you walk up and say, well, you know, we're a conservation organization. Can we have a big discount? Can you give us about 10 years to raise that much money before you actually sign the deal? All that. No, you got to get into the deal, and you're competing with a lot of people. And then finally, there's the politics. If somebody in that neighborhood didn't want you there, or is worried about you from a political viewpoint, it's hard for me to imagine in the Nature Conservancy that, but so here's what we've been able to do before we started using these new tools. And this is just the Colorado portion. This is up just about, there's Ellicott and a few other places right here. It's not the entire state, but I wanted you to see that. We have been with partners. I want to say we got a lot of partners, the biggest being the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust. And so these are the protection over time since I got into Colorado. And I'm not taking credit for it. I'm just saying that's the time frame. In the 70s and 80s and 90s, there were just a few parcels out here. So we've been able to do pretty well. In fact, over 715,000 acres in Colorado have been put into conservation easements or protected lands, when before military, state land, national grasslands, and a few others. That's it. So we're doing pretty well, actually, in Colorado, but it's not enough. And we're not satisfied, and I don't think you should be. So with that part that's left, now this is a little bigger area. This is when I said I was going to talk about the southern high plains, and this is the area we're talking about. So Colorado over Kansas, Oklahoma, which now most of this part is under Native American jurisdiction now. And you can see as we keep going here, New Mexico, and the Texas Panhandle are all in the area that we're focused on. Our goals are to protect 14 million acres by 2050. And we think we can do it with these new tools and probably new ones that'll come up. So this is the current impacts. In other words, this study took little small watersheds and evaluated the data and said which ones are currently the most impacted. So this is the really impacted stuff: farms, windmills, highways, and not a lot of houses out in this part of western Kansas, but you can see the big parts that are left are the paler colors in here, and of course there. And so Colorado's lucky we have one of the biggest parts of the landscape in that southeastern part in particular, but all the way up north of the Arkansas River is pretty wild country. And then the threats, though, to conversion: suitable lands for alternative energy sources, looking at NRCS and the potential soils for farming that are in there. So these colored areas, again, with the same kind of 1 to 5, low risk of change, big areas, but the higher risk. And if you're in Kansas, you're really trying to get the last pieces in Kansas. And then, so what's left of the Southern Plains, however, is the greener areas here. The more green, yellow, that's better. And that's what we're now focused on. We call this the Southern High Plains. And the terminology is a little mixed if you're familiar with that biogeography, but nonetheless, that's what we're focusing on, is the greener areas. With one addition, and that is, you'll notice that the river corridors need a little help here. There's some rough country in there that's not necessarily in the best condition and could be threatened by future projects. And that's the connectivity we know we all need for biodiversity in the future to be able to move just like it did after the Pleistocene. It moved hundreds or thousands of miles, and we've got to leave those pathways open to them. So this is then the map that we're using today. It adds, in addition to those other threats and those other opportunities that we just talked about, it's now, these colors are indicating what's called a resilient and connected network of all those conservation lands we just talked about. It's adding in climate change, or at least the projections for where they're going. It's adding in it's called geological features that will allow diversity to be more diverse in some places than others. Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, you lost your microphone.
Oh, yeah?
It's on the back of your shirt or. Oh, yeah. There you go.
Mike will come get me in a minute. I'll keep wrapping it around my ear enough, and then it'll. How about that? Sorry, Sandy. So anyway, this is the map we're working from now, and these are the pieces. That doesn't mean that one white piece up here is not going to be important down the road, but it does mean we have nicely identified, scientifically backed up places that we need to work. And so that's what we're focusing on, but it's huge. And so that goes back to the first part of the topic. How are we going to get that much bigger and faster? Well, I'm going down the line here. These are just some projects that have been going on for a while now. There you go. So the projects that we've done since we started some of these new tools, mostly in Colorado, are already at 273,000 acres. That's a lot of land. That's as big as basically as Rocky Mountain National Park. And so we have been testing out some of the ideas I'm going to move to. These are other projects that are ongoing now. So you'll know. There's the Red Hills In this area, it's kind of the last beautiful prairie out there that's been largely untouched. Let's see, Prairie Canyon lands, that's up in here. Again, still doing more there. Cimarron Valley Ranch is right here. But that total comes up to 750,000 acres of projects we have that we're in discussions on now. So this, I mean, we're talking about a lot of work and but it's a surprisingly small number of people that are doing it because they're working their bottoms off. But they're very excited about this because we've been able to be successful. Now, I want to go back and make sure I make this point. We've been doing, not we, the Nature Conservancy, we in conservation have been doing great work. We get some really good stuff done. We are reintroducing black-footed ferrets back onto prairie dog towns throughout much of their historic range. It's not very successful yet. We got a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of Fish and Wildlife Service personnel shifting that's going on, which is making it complicated. But this particular, the Walker Ranch down near Pueblo, I mentioned that one, about 80,000 acres. He has breeding population of black-footed ferrets going on there right now. And that's beautiful. With that, we know, right, the prairie dogs, the mountain plovers, some long-billed curlews, and all the things that go with them. So that's getting at that thing of size, just happens to be on one parcel. One of the first innovations we tried, I was lucky enough to get onto the Bohart Ranch, which is east of Colorado Springs, about 30 miles. I was driving down doing an inventory in the county for possible natural areas. And I got over onto that east side of El Paso County, and the grass was this tall on the sandhills, looked almost ungrazed, which at that time I had a little different view than I do today about grazing, but the birds were calling from the tops of them. It was gorgeous. Lots of cassin sparrows and brewer's sparrows and lark buntings and all that. It was just beautiful. It was all owned by the state land board and was leased out. Now, I found out later that that wasn't necessarily a good thing, but we created a partnership with them and they gave us the lease, a 25-year conservation lease on this property, the Bohart Ranch. And it's amazing. Box turtles, we could still have about 165 box turtles that are marked out there. So whenever we do come across them, we can, if it is marked, we can know how old it is now and when it was marked, when it last bred that we know of. They're doing a lot of secret breeding, apparently. There's a lot of them. So anyway, that was one of the first innovation deals. In other words, how can we hold something up long enough so that in the future it might be okay? The challenge is this is I'm going to try to illustrate what this looks like. When I was first there, I came down the highway from Ellicott, and there were almost no houses or any other kind of infrastructure except the Ellicott School. But now when you ride down there, all of this area, remembering that's a 50,000 acre ranch, is basically divided home sites. Colorado Springs is moving that way, and it's worse than that because if you go up here, it's the same thing. There's another 77,000 acre property here owned by a conservation-minded person, but everything in between is a problem. Okay, so the Bohart Ranch is still a huge piece of land. The areas to the east of it are developing as well, but much slower. And then I'll come to another property that we've sort of protected over there too. And that's this one. The Brett Gray Ranch is another 50,000 acre ranch, just about 30 miles east of the Bohart Ranch. Shortgrass Prairie, you can see the list of things that are over there. And that's not the full list, but lots of prairie dogs, mountain plover. And by the way, that rancher, I just love him because I asked him, I said, well, how are you doing with the prairie dogs? He says, oh, I'm just doing fine. I said, well, what's your biggest problem out here then? Because he had at that time about 3,000 or 4,000 acres of prairie dogs. He said, rain. That's my problem. If I got rain, my cows are doing fine. So needless to say, I love him. So this is where that property is when you sow Colorado Springs and you go out here. So this is the Bohart Ranch, and this then is the Brett Gray Ranch. Islands, they need to be connected. We've done the studies. It's going to be really hard. There's about 200 properties between the two. So there are things that are going to be challenging. And then we have to do preserve types of systems where that becomes a protected piece of land or a managed piece of land for a specific goal. And if in the future, we might even have to translocate some species, but it's working for now. And it's a wonderful place to go. We ought to think about making the Audubon trip out there. You would like that. And that's what the landscape looks like. You know, it's the same thing everybody tries to drive through as fast as possible when they're coming from the east. So, but it's a fantastic group of wetlands. It has 27 playas on it, 50 if you count the really tiny ones. They're depressions in the prairie where there's no outlet. So the water, when it rains from the surface, it fills it up there. And there's a little bit of leaching into the ground in this part of the world. Great for amphibians, great for a lot of water. We see, you're talking about the stilts and the migrating shorebirds. We see them out there when there's water, which there hasn't been a lot in the last 20 years. But anyway, did that get at it enough? Yep. And there are some big ones in the Texas Panhandle. I'm trying to think even maybe into the Oklahoma part that are as much as 200 acres in size. Most of the ones we're talking about, you could put in this room easily. Very dry in our part of the world. Now, the Crazy French Ranch was mentioned, and it's a fascinating idea for me was because it's still getting at that idea. The landowners wanted to sell the land. They had an enormous price on it. They didn't want to sell it for conservation. They wanted to sell it to developers because they thought that was going to be the future of that area near Trinidad, Colorado, if you didn't know where that was. That is the peak, Fisher's Peak. It's an iconic thing. The Native Americans, the explorers, everybody used that as a landmark of importance. So that was the first time that we had been confronted with a large price, an important piece of property that was going to connect the Southern Rocky Mountains to the Great Plains across I-25. And we didn't have the money and the landowner didn't want to sell it to us. So we had to figure that out. And this is where we first got into low interest loans. There are a lot of philanthropists we found and discovered that are perfectly willing to give you their millions for now, but they want it back for their kids or for whatever other purposes. That was really new to us. So the hit is that nobody wanted it for more than 10 years. So that's what our timeline was. And what we ended up doing was two things. The state wanted it as a state park, so we were going to make them pay for that. They're part of it. And we were going to put in $3 or $4 or $5 million, but we had to first front all of it to buy the entire property. And that's what we did. And the lady owner wasn't really overly thrilled about it, but she was most upset over the fact that we were going to change the name from the Crazy French Ranch. But with the Nature Conservancy, we're not going to insult anybody if at all possible, even though the landowner was the one who created the name. So anyway, that's just a little funny side story. But this is now done. You can go down there and visit it. And I will say that I was the leader of a planning team, and it's pretty amazing that we were able to get basically a state park. People can climb right to that peak, but all the other rocks up in the rest of this, they are not, let's see, there's 40%, a little over 40% of the ranch that's basically, you can't go there. It's for the wildlife. That's it. And then there's about 35% that's called soft recreation. A few foot trails and all that, but none of the heavy bikes and all that in that area. Got some Boulder, appreciate that. And then the rest of it is for recreation. They're going to trails, campgrounds, and all that. So that was, to me, we did it based on that we had a lot of groundwork in there, actually looking. Pam was in there looking at the moths. Yep, it's an amazing place with some old growth timber. The bear and the mountain lion population there is as heavy as I've seen anywhere in the state. It's unbelievable. We put wildlife cameras, about 30 wildlife cameras out so we could kind of track that. Anyway, that's the deal though was unwilling landowner. Nobody else actually ended up being willing to pay, and we were willing to put the money up first, but that was because of low interest loans. That's the first time we'd ever come across that. And we had a 10-year horizon, and the governor wanted it open faster than that. So we got our money well before the 10 years was up and got it to the donors, and they were thrilled with the whole deal. So that's a new and it was a new and novel deal at that time to do that kind of transaction. Let's see, who are we? I'll do one more, make sure I got the right one. Oh, this is just telling you that once we were known to be able to carry out a deal quickly, the people that were getting out of the ranching business were a lot. And so we got approached very often. And so we actually worked on most of those particular numbers up there reflect real ranches, and we actually got to it. And it basically, all those were in that group of successes that I just showed you earlier. So we are very happy with that. Most of them have easements. So we bought the property, we conserved them, we put easements on them with the new landowner that was coming in, and the Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust held them. And I'll just say this, that in bison country, former bison country, well-run ranches with the grazing are great. It helps the biodiversity. It helps the landowner because that's why most of them bought it, was to be ranchers, billionaire ranchers. That's an idea for me. But so it really works out well. I'm working some in Arizona, as I mentioned, I think, and it's not so easy there because there were no bison. Historically, we have no records. And you might have to go do that study again there to make sure. But there's no record of bison in that area. So what do you do when the landowner comes in and says, oh, we want to graze in here, I want to be a cowboy? And that's not necessarily the biodiversity is ready for that. Okay, so a lot of ranches, we got to them. Since we mentioned J.E. Canyon, for those of you who didn't get down there, and it's one of the heartbreakers for me, I was hoping for about 5 more years that we had that so we could get a lot more people down to appreciate that country. But anyway, so more and more ranches, some really interesting biological features. I've been a lot over the prairie and I have not come across many rattlesnake hibernacula. And that's only a part of it. They were all the way up in here. There you can see down here, another hole down there. We were estimating hundreds, and that's about the best we could get. These features are kind of hard to put in a conservation easement, say don't mess with them. People aren't very fond of that level of restriction, but this ranch is actually exemplifying some that we missed. This is one, it's really fantastic. It's right on the New Mexico-Colorado border, the Cross L Ranch. And this particular property really astounded me. It goes up the western edge of Mesa de Maya and through this beautiful oak and grasslands up in the top. But there was the owner wanted to do the deal with a different organization from Montana. And so we said, well, we'll partner with you on that. But they couldn't structure the deal. They had that problem of we can't find the funds, and they didn't have a record of finding the funds. So that was one that we missed. It's still out there. It's not developed or anything, but I'm hoping to see that one come back to us. Boy, that was weird. And then I asked this question because we've got these new tools, but Pawnee Buttes, we started really working hard up there and we did about 4 easements. It was before these new tools and it was fine. But then the oil and gas came in and the wind. And you guys all, if you've been up, how many of you have been up there and seen it? Okay, so it's different than when the first time you went, right? And it's kind of sad. But I would call it a challenge for the Nature Conservancy is it was good. Oil and gas came in. Oil and gas is not going to be there forever. And then what's it going to be? And what the Nature Conservancy decided to do was get out of that landscape. I'm raising that as a question to the Conservancy. How then are we going to come back and still say this is worth saving after the oil and gas is pulled out? So that's a challenge. And I say we were too slow on this one. Had we actually worked harder on that, had we just had the same tools now, we'd have had 50 easements up there and area probably this equal to the size of the Pawnee grasslands. Because people were getting out left and right. Okay, so I want to mention easements real quickly because they are so much cheaper than buying the land, but they're not cheap. And with the inflated land values, remembering that when I went down there, let's see, into the Comanche grasslands area and Purgatoire Canyon and all that, the first time I went down in the mid-90s, land was about $90 an acre. Think about that. If we had the same tool today, what we could do with it in terms of the amount of land we could have protected down there, or the amount of land I would have bought if I was smart at that time. But the whole Conservancy does have 1,200 nature preserves. That's fee title land. We own them. 3.5 million acres of easements, and it's the largest private preserve system in the world. And the question that we raised to our board is, and it's still not enough, what are we going to do? Because it costs a lot of money to manage that many acres. And we know we can't buy it all. And we know we can't put easements on it all. Nice idea, but we can't do that. So this is the challenge, again, in our face. Money, but it still won't do it all. So what happens then when land comes up for sale? I just want to kind of put this picture out of what the actual thing that happens. I've already said we know if it's way out in the middle of somewhere and it's not obvious that it has conservation value, we'll figure that out because we've been around and the people that work in these Nature Conservancy offices have been around a lot. But when it comes up for sale, a lot of things happen very quickly. The first thing that happens is brokers have already contacted people and let them know that they think might be interested. They usually already have tours before we get invited to the next one. They're ready right now, and the brokers, the less time they spend presenting the property, the better their profits are at the end, right? I mean, that makes sense. The sellers want to sell, and they don't want it on the market for a year. They want it on the market for a month. So then for us, if they did want to sell and we wanted to buy it, we have to generate a contract and then fundraise. And we need, this is today, and we need some on the ground science to tell us about the values. It's expensive. And then once we buy it, we got to hire a manager or keep the one that was on there and get a staff that's out there to look at it and then start doing groundwork with the local government and the other the people there. So that's how busy that gets. And if it's just an easement, what do we put in the terms of an easement? That's where we need our science staff to be on the ground. But if we don't already own it, most landowners are not really excited about having the Nature Conservancy traipsing around out there looking and seeing what they can find before it's been sold to us. So the transaction stuff happens pretty fast. The science needs to happen fast so we can know what terms to put on an easement either now or later. We need more people. I've just mentioned these rapid ecological assessments. Pam's been on 1, 2, 3, 4, and others. But these are ideas where we have seasoned people who understand the landscape. We get them out there. We invite them to come with us on the property. They take a look at it. It's not a bio blitz. You're not looking for everything, but you're trying to figure out what are the most important conservation values, what condition are they in, what's threatening them, and what do you need to do about it? What do you need to put in the terms of the easement or with your own ownership? It's really a great tool. And again, when it comes up for sale, of course, one of the problem with the scientists, once they get on a property, they usually want to keep it no matter what. They don't want to sell it. They don't want to put just an easement on it. They want to keep it because they fall in love quickly. And again, back to Fisher's Peak State Park, but applying the new tools, and this is what we call it, buy, protect, and sell. And so I'm going to go through a little bit of that. What we want to do is we want to get in there quickly, raise the funds, buy the property, sometimes within 30 days. When you're thinking about $25 million or so, that's, if it's $90 million, you got a little different problem. It takes a little bit longer, but you want to get in there and buy it now because somebody else is. And there was a fantastic 60,000 acre property in the volcanic zone just in northern edge of New Mexico. And we were in there talking with the landowners, and the brokers really thought this was a good idea that we would buy the property. Somebody came in after our visit 2 days later and paid cash. Well, a seller has a hard time turning that down, and the brokers couldn't take it down. So in other words, but this has all got to, we have to, if we want to commit to it, our land people need to get out there, get on it, create the deal, assure the funding. Now, there's another thing that I haven't talked about yet is we have now created a bank of funding of $70 million so that if we need to, we can get in just like that guy writing the check. Now, it's been donated, so that money is there free. Not free, it's free to use. Okay. So we call it the Southern High Plains. There's a couple of other things that were on that list of things that might need to change. Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Texas Panhandle are all in there. And it's big, wide open prairie over a lot of it. This is Dan Florey's country. We were talking about him at dinner. This is what he loves in that part of the world. So the Southern High Plains Initiative then, I mentioned that science capacity is a challenge. And the Nature Conservancy runs much like a state. If you're in the Colorado program, you don't cross that line. You might go visit over there, but you don't cross that line and do business. However, Kansas has 6 scientists, Oklahoma 3, Texas, that Panhandle region has 3, and 2 of them don't really live there. New Mexico has 3, and Colorado has 4. All right, and that's not including me as the retiree in the bunch. So that's how many people could be deployed on a single transaction in each of those states under the old system. What we decided and asked ourselves the question is, well, if we had a $94 million deal to do and we needed to act quickly, how could we then put scientists from all 5 states together and make it happen better and faster? And so that's what we do now. So that total science staff, if we don't invite other people, is 19 people that can be put on the ground and worked quickly. And then I mentioned again these rapid ecological assessment teams if we have enough time. So the question is what if we acted like 1 unit rather than 5 units, which is the way the Nature Conservancy's always run. Fundraisers don't fundraise to somebody in Kansas if you're in Colorado. Scientists don't cross the line and look at ranch property over there. So, and government relations people are the same. Don't you talk to our senator. We got him. We're saying that needs to break down for certain deals. I mean, if you're trying to buy a property in Summit County and here, it's not likely that this is going to play. We don't need to call another state in to do that property. Most of them are small. But if you're trying to do a large 100,000 acre ranch in northern New Mexico, we need help. So we need to break through that. So this is, again, the map that we're working from. It's huge, and yet we have caused a lot of stress amongst some of our colleagues in the rest of the Nature Conservancy because they don't understand how we could do 12 and 15 multi-million-dollar deals in a few years. And we're so excited about that because They got to get all, if they're going to win in their own, even Illinois with the little parcels that they have to deal with and sometimes cannot keep up with the need that conservation has. So we've got to break through this. Doesn't mean we break down state programs. It means we use state programs for some things and we use these composite groups for others. I think.
What did the SHPI mean again? I forgot.
Southern High Plains Initiative. Sorry, I probably didn't say the whole name. Somewhere, yeah, this is the slide I showed earlier. My apologies. But I do say these are the projects that have been done now. And the green ones, I think, no, it's the green ones are the ones that have been done, and the yellow ones are ongoing projects right now. And just when you look at the span of all this, and there was actually this one, yeah, this one just got sold recently. So that one's now complete. But anyway, the point is we are now working on doubling the rate that we currently have right now of land protection. We're trying to figure it out. And we've shipped out the process to the Northern Great Plains, Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota. We're trying to get them to try it because they have the same, oh, no, we can't raise that money. There's no way we can do that. But we have enough backing now that we have a goal for 3 more years now to have $170 million of a cash fund that's ready to put on deals because it happens that fast and we don't want to lose. All these little stars going up. So that's basically what the Southern High Plains Initiative is. I haven't showed you a whole lot of pictures of the properties, but what I have showed you is what I think is a new tool that we're going to be able to get closer to our goals. I don't think this is the last ones. And in this political climate, who knows what will happen. But so I just want to say that, you know, in the final thing, we're still losing. We know it, but we're losing slower. And now we're losing even more slowly. And I'm excited about that. It gets me. I'm not getting out of the field until I have to. Let's just put it that way. New strategies and tools are needed to forestall the significant losses in the Southern High Plains, and we could just say almost everywhere. The Southern High Plains Initiative of TNC is using tools that grow funding, create more ways of using staff, and using cross-boundary fundraising to greatly increase efforts to assure the prairie lands, its wildlife, waters, and the humans will be present and thriving together. And I haven't really spent much of the effort talking about the human part, except that I know a lot of the ranchers out there, they love their land. But the ranching industry is the way it's structured right now, it's not going to be with us long. And so some of our favorite ranchers and some of the wisest ones that I know who've done all the numbers, they got a family out there, they want to create a living out there, they just love it. And he said to me, he used to be the Cattlemen's Association president twice. He said, Chris, by 2050, we're broke. And the thing is the way the global cattle market works, assuming we'll still have a global cattle market, the way it works is that they're keeping prices down by getting cattle from elsewhere. And so when that happens, but the price of your trucks, your tractors, all of the stuff you need to do your life is going up. And by the way, I mean, these are smart kids. Some of them went to school at Princeton. A bunch of them went to school in Princeton. A couple of Harvard kids. So these are not, you know, they don't want to hang out at the local drugstore when they're 35. These are smart people who really want to make it work, but they don't see a way out right now. And so one of the things we need to work more on, and it's what I haven't talked a lot about, is that economic approach once we're there in the local community. We are talking about ecotourism, just so you'll know. It's not going to work for too many people because you don't have that much of a market, but keep your thoughts on that. And can you use a less than a glitzy hotel for 2 nights of bird watching in the Southern Plains out there for $25 a person? That kind of thing is what makes a difference in their lives right now. And it would probably make a big, big difference for the biodiversity if people saw at least one form of alternative income, just one. Let's see. Anything else I wanted to make on that? I did not talk much about stewardship. The actual initiative we got from the NRCS, because you can look it up too. I don't need to worry about this. We got something like $25 million to buy land. Has to be matched 1-to-1. We also had $32 million to improve the stewardship on lands adjacent to what we bought and protected. So it's not just the acres of land that you purchase and protect. We're supposed to be spreading this out. I haven't heard the latest results from that. It's a little bit challenged when you go in and start talking to people about managing differently. But it's working. It's just working more slowly. So we are, I promise, working hard to try and get more protection done to make that loss curve go down more all the time. And I hope that in many of these places, you'll be able to visit before too much longer, as some of these people are starting to open up to the idea of a little bit of ecotourism, even if it's just a site visit out there for a day and then you stay in La Junta, which is kind of, they've got it fixed up a lot now. So we ought to think about that. And I'll just offer, because of what we talked about, I'd offer to lead the tour for a couple of days. Okay, so thank you all for this opportunity. I hope it has explained something, the new business out there, and we shall see you out there on the ground. We got a question back here. Okay.
We'll get the lights turned on and yeah, question? Karen.
I'm fascinated by your new strategy of buying land and then selling it again to someone else. When you do that, is there anything besides the buyer getting the land that they bought that they get in addition to buying that land?
Great question. So we would require, upon selling that land to them, not the buying of it, but the selling to the new owner, a conservation easement with appropriate management limitations where it would be on there. And that's what they get. What we have to consider is, can they make a living on it? And so sometimes, like there are people who still think we should just no grazing on the prairie, no grazing. It's a nature preserve. It doesn't work, and it's not the right thing ecologically anyway. So we're giving and taking a little bit, but we would never give to where we thought that the conservation values were jeopardized. If we did that, we'd keep it.
Hold on a second. The Zoomers can't hear you.
They don't get any advice from you or
There's no formal transaction like that, but we're there for them all the time.
okay.
Where if they call me and ask me, Chris, I got a problem with these prairie dogs, I need to know what to do. It's a conflict for me, but I'll be there for them.
And are there things like grazing rates that you stipulate in the conservation easement? Is it that detailed or not?
We make sure that they can pass the test of good grazing land condition within RCS. It might look a little bit different than what I would do if I was on the ground. I like mosaics and things like that. But it's the best we can tell, and from the best research, nothing's harmed. One thing about a conservation easement, just real quickly, it doesn't get you everything you want. In conservation, it takes away those biggest threats. No mines, no, oil well type of things. But what it does do is put the land, even if the landowner doesn't totally agree 100% with Chris on managing mountain lions, what it does is gives us the opportunity and the time to, in the future, either with the next landowner or this one being, challenged and coming to a different decision. We get to have that opportunity, whereas without it, we know where the land will eventually go.
Thank you for that question. We'll go to the Zoomers. Sandra, do you have any?
We do. Linda, would you please ask your question?
Hey, thanks. Chris, you mentioned Brett Gray Ranch, and I'm very interested in that property as it's a great birding location. Do you think the State Land Board has any interest in selling it?
It's a good question. You know, it's not entirely clear, but what I will tell you is that to solve the Bohart Ranch problem which is they didn't really want to sell it, but the military wanted us to buy it so they would have clear flyways for their training flights that are going over it. So the Department of Defense is paying for us to acquire the ranch in the same tools. Then we'll put an easement on it.
We have a question here in the audience.
One question is, you said that the ranchers are having a hard economic time of it because there were low-priced alternatives to what they were selling. Is that like beef from Brazil, or what is that?
I think a large part of it is the beef from international beef markets. So it keeps everybody's prices lower. It's not that we as the buyer of the meat in the market necessarily see that, but a few dollars a pound on the animal is what's driving that down. And it's stable, it's steady.
Okay, and a slightly related question, like there was this idea of Buffalo Commons and trying to make money. Turner and others were like trying to sell buffalo, or, get rid of fences and have more buffalo roaming around. Sort of, is that feasible there? And related to that, are you working with other groups like Wild Earth Guardians and Center for Biological Diversity that have had a focus about, fencing off the stream sides and stuff to bring back the native vegetation?
Good questions. You got about 3 questions in on that one. No. So first of all, yes, we work with a long list of partners whenever needed. On management issues, we are moving faster with real estate transactions than we are able to keep up with all of the management issues. But for example, trying to get rid of tamarisk in the Purgatoire River, we certainly have worked with a lot of organizations. Some of them fund helicopter flights to spray, and I'm not sure what's the right thing to do. Anytime we put toxins on the ground, I always worry. But we are getting into the fencing and virtual fencing business. Are you familiar with virtual fencing? Basically, you put a collar on every cow.
Shock.
Yeah, it could be a shock collar if they don't behave. And their location, we know where every cow is because of its location. We do that through a GPS system. And then what you can do is get the cattle to start gathering in a bunch and then get them to be moving into another area or another pasture without ever having to go out on the ground, which is to me a nightmare. But, maybe I'm not the one that has to go out there as often as they do to check everything out. So we're working on those types of efforts now to see how they work. Depends on how rough the country is. I mean, your radio collar can't go up and over like this. It's that way and in. But that's one. And fencing projects we're just getting into now with a couple of the big groups that are doing fencing and trying to make wildlife friendly fencing more commonly used. The thing about 18 or whatever the latest one is off the ground, so the pronghorn can go under and no barbs on the top, things like that. The problem that we're having right now is that's another fundraising, because fencing used to be about $1,200 a mile when you're using manual labor, and now it's about $12,000 a mile. So, I mean, it's one of those challenges. It's not that we don't want to do it. We just have to figure out in the same way we're doing the real estate. Okay, how are we going to do this?
Thank
Did
you.
I answer all your questions on that one? Okay.
Yeah. uh-huh.
Oh, well, yeah, the Buffalo Commons. That's, you know, it never had much traction with the private landowners to be giving up something on their own land to a group of people that they don't know or trust. And even if they're good friends, they may not know or trust them. So I would say there's a lot of people who now are believing that that was a good idea that the family had in when they were working on that concept of Buffalo Commons, but it's not realistic. We'll see. I mean, who knows what the world's going to do, but we do not find many cattle ranchers, and I would say then bison ranchers as well, that are willing to give up and have multiple managers of one piece. We actually tried it recently and it was a real struggle. And so at the end, they just disbanded. There's about 27 different people. We were trying to get young ranchers to be able to buy into something and that they would have a share basically of that 100,000 acre ranch. And it didn't work. They weren't willing to give it up.
Thank you. Sandra, any other questions in the Zoomers?
Vicky Scharnhorst has a question. Go ahead, Vicky. Unmute and ask your question. There you go.
Well, I thought you were going to ask my question for me. Sorry, I don't have it up. What does it say?
It's in the chat. You can still see it.
I know I have to get to the chat though. So I'm not in that screen.
Okay. What Vicky wrote was there are people who have some means, but not $10 million in capital, who would be interested in investing in and living on a property that could be preserved and protected. Is there a model to engage individuals of this sort?
You know, I'm not really familiar in this part of the world with that model. That model is still being used in the Appalachian Mountains in several places that I know where we're trying to connect patches of mountains in there. I don't know how it's going, so I can't say that out here that there's a lot of opportunity to get into at scale conservation for sure. But, you know, there are people who have gone into the Pawnee National Grasslands and tried to buy all or individual parcels, those inholdings that were there. And you might, if you're interested in prairie, you might look at that opportunity. It's not going to be as cheap as it was, but I know that the Forest Service and the conservation organizations are trying to figure out how do you stop people from going into the middle of a big block of prairie, putting up a 3-story house and doing that kind of stuff. And so having a conservation-minded investor would be a wonderful thing. And that might be a place to look. And David Augustine, he'll kick me in the butt for telling his name out loud, but he would be a good one to talk to. He's been really interested in solving that problem, Forest Service.
Thank you.
Any other? Yes, Carol, you have one. Here you go.
Where do you find the donors who are giving low interest loans? Do you recruit them as
A few pop up as they hear of these things. Mostly, though, it's the network of about 1,000 Nature Conservancy fundraisers. But it's often somebody who's not making a donation, like in California, but they're interested in something and then they're willing to pass it on. It's not all that common that they're willing to pass on their donors, but if they do that, and then usually they help us arrange for their donor because it's a service to their donor to come out here and have a trip, and then that's when we get in the plane with them or the on the ground or whatever it might be. So it's there's a growing network of these, and there is actually one other group which I'm not allowed to say the name of, but they're wealthy and they are able to go and connect a lot of people with the idea that's going on here, and they're our big hope for that $170 million. So that's the network that's being built.
Yeah. Wait, let me give you this so the Zoomers can hear.
I am very intrigued by giving the ranchers secondary income. Are you working on any kind of list of people who might welcome birders, campers, whatever, to be on their lands?
Pam, that's a good, I thought it was going to be a little harder than that, but what we're in is the first level conversations and trying to find somebody from the outside to come in and do an assessment of what is the biggest need on a per property basis. There are several ranches out there that are all fantastic with great people. Most of the people are knowledgeable about their own wildlife and, indigenous people's artwork and all that. The challenge is usually they don't have the infrastructure to do it. And I mean, you've been on the Smoky Rim. They've got a double wide trailer that always needs some cleaning. Now, I remember you were, and Mike and I have been there too. But the bottom line is if they wanted to do this, and they knew they had $250 coming in every once in a while, they could probably hire a local person who they all like to work to actually keep it clean. And then that's 8 or 10 people. So we're still working with them on that. And of course, nobody likes to hear they don't have infrastructure that's suitable for things like that. So it's a little bit tender right now. I'm also working with some people who run one of the ecotourism places on the East Coast, and they built the facility. And if we had the right kind of studies that would say this would be a fantastic place, here are the things, if you could put them together, we'll fundraise for it and put up a decent building for them to use. And then you still have the problem of who's going to be the guide. So we're coming up with a lot of things to jump over, but they are interested. Most of the land, let's see, 2, 3, 4 of the landowners are interested in that. The billionaires are not interested. Yeah, they've got their little paradise. So yeah.
Sandra, back to you. Any other Zoomer questions?
Just that there's some enthusiasm in the chat for ecotourism opportunities. So we're endorsing your earlier comments.
We shall get together and pursue.
All right.
Questions here in the audience? It's like we do.
It's not really a question, but there is a thing before Congress right now called the Fix Our Forests Act that is going to be voted on before the end of the month. So if anyone really likes forests, you could contact your senators because it's already passed the House. It's pretending to prevent fires, but it's just trying to give away forests in the Northwest and Florida and everywhere throughout the country to logging companies at a really cheap rate. It has 10,000 acre exclusions on clear cuts where no Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, NEPA, or anything else applies. So you can find out all about it at Wild Earth Guardians under their actions.
Good. And I know the Nature Conservancy's government relations people are working with the local Congress and Senate on that bill.
Yes. Within the months.
Yep.
Contact your senators.
And I heard,
Hickenlooper's trying to get it
Yeah.
passed, but Bennett would be good in Colorado.
yeah,
Hickenlooper's evil, pro-development, whatever.
tends to lean that way. Well, I heard it from a reliable source on the news today that we have the largest forests in the world, and therefore we should be cutting more of it. So,
Okay. Well, trying to end on a positive note here. Chris, thank you so much for a wonderful talk.
thank you.